this is Kermit the Frog.
Fascinating.
I'm Captain Kirk.
Magic is always there,
Aye, sir.
as long as we keep looking for it.
Engage.
What does God need with a starship?
Thank you, love you. Mwah.
I protest. I am not a merry man.
Places, please. And here we go.
Down at Fraggle Rock.
Welcome, Doozers, Gorgs, Klingons, and Things, to episode 136 of the MuppeTrek Podcast. I'm Jarman.
And I'm Steve. We're on a journey across the stars to compare and contrast the creative worlds of Jim Henson and Gene Roddenberry.
And what started as reviews of The Muppet Show and Star Trek, the original series, has expanded into outer space.
And this week we have Fraggle Rock episode, The Challenge, and Next Generation episode, A Matter of Honor.
But before we do that, Steve, I think I want to rock. Yeah.
That's right. There are all kinds of gems, jewels, and geodes in this world, many of which might be able to be found in Fraggle Rock. And this week's gem is Augolite. It's an aluminum phosphate mineral, if you didn't know. And it ranges from like clear to white, yellow, rose, and green. It typically kind of shows up as pale and milky versions of these colors. They're very soft and brittle. So they're not found in any jewelry, really, and only very complete collections because they're incredibly hard to cut. And they were originally only found in a single mine in California, which ran dry, and they didn't know where to find any more for a few years. And they finally found more in both Peru and Canada. I always like looking up what these are used for otherwise, if not for jewelry. And the fact is, Augolite isn't really used for any real stuff. In Eastern medicine, as a gem, it is used to treat night terrors, insomnia, and fatigue.
Just like hold it while you sleep kind of thing.
I couldn't get a read on whether it was like a placement thing or if they ground it up. I really couldn't get a read on it.
Interesting.
But yeah, so that's Augolite, and that rocks.
That rocks.
I want to rock!
Speaking of rock, let's talk about what's going on in Fraggle Rock. What's up, Doc? Doc got a home computer, which is very exciting. Sprocket isn't interested at first until Doc pulls up a competitive game, Zombie Attack. Sprocket proves that he is a superior gamer, getting just like 700,000 points, but then Doc racks up 800,000 points. And then Schimmelfinny calls, and it turns out he racked up 800,000 points. Doc challenges him, but Schimmelfinny trounces him. Doc says he's never going to play this stupid game again, basically. Sprocket gets rid of the disc, and they switch to a new game, Galaxy Pirate, which is a co-player game.
I love seeing those big floppy disks. That was great.
Yeah, man. And what's going down in Fraggle Rock? Red is sick and tired of Gobo making all the decisions for the group. She's friggin' over it. She is sick of him being the leader, but he says that he learned everything he knows from his Uncle Traveling Matt, so of course he's the natural leader. They decide to go see the trash heap to decide who the leader should be. They sneak through the Gorg's garden with Papa Gorg napping nearby, but they get in a fight and they wake up Papa Gorg, and he comes and traps them in a basket, saying he's going to tell Junior about it. Junior wanders out. He bemoans that all the responsibility he has as a prince, and it's mostly gardening. That's what being a prince is to Gorgs. And his father openly tells him he's stupid. And he sings a song about it called Dum Dee Dum Dee Dum. That is really degrading. The Fraggles try to move the basket just as Junior sits on it. They can't move it. He's too big. Red pretends to be the magic genie of the bushel basket and tries to convince Junior to get off. Pa Gorg comes out as Junior is making his wish to the basket, and Pa tries to look under the basket, but Junior stops him because you can't look at the genie under the basket. Gobo then tries to be the magic genie. He convinces Junior that he has a deadly case of gorgliosis. Junior falls over, thinks he's dead, which he recollects as very much like being alive. But he also falls in front of their path of escape. Pa Gorg comes out and also assumes Junior's dead, despite the fact that he's like moving and talking. The Fraggles tickle him relentlessly. And even with that, he won't get up. He finally gets up after Boober starts singing like a funeral dirge. And then Gobo and Red pick up the pace, and it turns into like a highfalutin dance number funeral dirge. They sing a song called Dixie Wailing. as Pa brings Ma out to mourn their dead dancing boy. It's real weird. And the Fraggles escape together, and it's a very abrupt ending. There's no real resolution as to what happened. They just escape.
I did notice that.
And that's what's going down in Fraggle Rock. So, German, what did you think of this episode of Fraggle Rock?
Yeah, I did notice that the whole crux is like Red and Gobo in the initial part were saying, oh, we need to challenge each other over who's going to be the leader of this group. And then at the end, that's not really solved because they worked together, which could have been a good moment for them to say, we don't need to have a leader, we just need to work together. But they didn't say that. They just the episode ended. I was like, okay, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of took it as like, well, maybe we're both the leader of the group.
Yeah,
like, that's kind of
maybe.
how I ended up.
I guess, but they left it kind of ambiguous. That was strange. But I really liked the Gorg heavy episode that it was, because I found myself laughing more in this episode than other episodes, because most of the episodes are really cute. But this episode had a lot of funny moments that were just like in him singing "Dum Dee Dum Dum" was like just great.
Dum dee dum dee dum dee dum.
I think Junior Gorg was like knocked it out of the park for his like heavy episode here. We didn't have any Wembley really. We have a little bit of Wembley, no Moki, no Trash Heap. So they really had to cut stuff out to like fit in this big Gorg plot line. And
this is one of the few early episodes that Moki just is not in.
Yeah, and there was no actual postcard. Like they got to do Uncle Traveling Matt segment through him talking about Uncle Traveling Matt.
I'll tell you about that in a bit.
Okay,
because I had this
right.
moment of what just happened here.
I love Boober is becoming one of my favorites because he's like basically like the depressed robot from what is that? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah, he is.
They said there's something about feeling brave, and he's like, all I feel is cowardice and paranoia. Because he also has the best vocabulary of any of the Fraggles. He uses large
really
words
does.
all the time. But also, I need to ask you a question. Maybe you'll know. How did they? I just didn't think about it till now. How do they move all the Gorg's facial features?
Those are they're electric servos in there.
I was gonna say it must be because I didn't think they were that far along with electric servos at that point. Because it was
so the Gorgs are very much like the dinosaurs in that there's a guy in a suit.
Yeah,
and inside of that big head, well, not for dinosaurs, but for inside the big head is this little tiny television that they're watching themselves on. And then additionally, there's another performer nearby who's working the mouth and doing a microphone.
Oh.
What did I tell you? And then
yeah, because I saw this first time where I was realizing, oh, wait, both his hands are moving and he's walking around. And I thought I saw something on the behind the scenes that servos were still pretty new with like the little guys. But yeah, apparently they're all servos. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what they did here was the live capture stuff was crazy and not really done. So there's that aspect to it. And then a lot of the little tiny miniatures they had developed for the doozers in this show, and they're between that and their work on the faces is what allowed them to transition into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
That's right.
And get the mechanisms small enough that they could fit them
in the mask
in this head, and then they didn't have to provide a television monitor to keep the head big. That's what all the Teenage Mutant Turtles see out of their mouth. And in fact, I'll talk about this in both TMNT and in Dinosaurs. Because the actors needed to look out of the mouth couldn't really be closed a whole lot. So there's a lot of improvised like noises and grunts in both TMNT and Dinosaurs because the performers would have to go, just to open the mouth so the performer inside could see where the hell they were going to go. So there's so many grunts and groans and shit in those shows because otherwise the performers would have been stumbling around.
And there's like high definition photos you can find online of the Ninja Turtles where the creepy things where you can see the eyes coming out of their mouth. Like
there's like one or two iconic shots where it's just really strange. It's
really
like that
creepy.
Scene from Beetlejuice.
Eyeballs.
Turns their heads and then eyeballs in the mouth. Yeah.
So yeah, that was my question for that. But yeah, what do you think of this episode?
So this, it just felt low. The whole thing felt low because physically the episode didn't physically move. They were trapped under that basket for so much of it that it just felt like the plot didn't go anywhere. And then the ending, which was like kind of unresolved as we kind of talked about, didn't help that fact.
Right.
It was like, they disagreed about who should be leader. In the end, they also didn't agree about who should be leader. I don't understand. We didn't get a trash heap. We barely got any Fraggles. We got no doozers except for that one thing they broke at the beginning. So I'm going to say this one's towards the bottom of Fraggle Rock for me.
I think for me,
even for a great Junior Gorg episode.
Right. I think that's the only reason I didn't put it towards the bottom is because I laughed a lot and there was there's funny lines. The songs were good. But then, it took it down for me because there wasn't a through line that resolved like they do so well in other episodes. So I was just like, okay, but it was fun. But so I'll give it a pass, but it's not it's not a bottom of the barrel or code of honor for me. So it's okay.
Fair. Low for me, but not bad. I think it just didn't move the way I liked it.
Yeah. Structure it right.
Well, Jordan, what do you think was silly creatures this week? Okay. So this was real weird because not only was it not the normal thing they do, it was fast in the cut that I watched, and I couldn't figure out what happened. But he talks about Uncle Traveling Matt. I learned everything from my Uncle Traveling Matt, like his encounter with the silly creature with the fire creatures, the mouth burners. There we go. And then the cut was quick, and I went, wait, what just happened? Because normally he's like reading a postcard, like, hey, come look at this from my Uncle Traveling Matt. It's very rare that he like transitions in anyway. But it was people smoking, the mouth burners. And it was him observing these mouth burners who keep lighting fires in their mouth. And though it seems awful and seems to hurt them, they just keep doing it. And then he was like, and one of the fires got really out of control. And so a guy lights a cigar up and he douses him with a thing of water. So like overall, it was good messaging about smoking.
Right.
Like it was anti-smoking, but they cut it because it was smoking.
They cut. What do you mean? What do you mean they cut it?
So from like the Disney version and the version that's on Apple TV and the other two release versions, it was cut.
Oh, so you had to go find, because I have a stork version, and so I didn't know it was cut. Yeah.
So the mouth burst thing is entirely cut. So literally, he's like, "Yeah, I learned everything from my Uncle Traveling Matt, like the time he met the mouth burners." And then the next cut is Red going, "That's just a myth." And I went, "Whoa, what just happened?"
Oh, okay, gotcha. I didn't realize.
So if you're watching the version that most people at home are probably watching, it's cut. It's just not there.
Yeah, because showing people literally smoking on screen on a children's show was jarring for me too. I was like, "Whoa, okay."
Yeah, they're in a restaurant too.
Yeah.
Like, apparently, one of those is Cheryl Henson.
Oh wow.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about tobacco in honor of the mouth burners.
Yeah.
It's been cultivated in the Americas with some early Mexican cultures as far as 1400 BC. In some native cultures in like North and Central America, tobacco is seen as a gift from the great creator. And the idea is that by smoking it, you can then like speak back to the great creator. But the thing is, people didn't smoke the same way back then as they do now. Apparently, old school tobacco was incredibly harsh. It was smoked in very small amounts and almost exclusively from like bigger pipes that allowed it to air out a bit more. And it wasn't until it really became a cash crop in like the Virginias and in the American South that they started breeding more smokable tobacco, basically. And the lighter strains of tobacco that came out of that are what made it like cigarettes. Became a thing because suddenly you could smoke a whole bunch of them. It wasn't just like a little bit for your pipe at night.
Gotcha.
It became a whole thing. And for a long time, the popularity of cigarettes also came from, there were like a lot of health claims associated with it for a long time. And these basically amounted to, this is literally the logic they used. They went, look how healthy and useful these Native Americans look. Tobacco must be good for you.
Oh, God.
Not that they live clean lives off the land and live in hardship and, like none of that.
No, it's the smoking.
It's the smoking that makes them like that. So,
well, you can speak with gods when you smoke. So apparently
it was genius. So that was Uncle Traveling Matt and his encounter with the mouth burners, which was incredibly strange.
Yes.
What did you think was the best MuppeTering moment this week?
I think there's a lot of cool stuff with the Gorgs and the Fraggles, but like one particular that stood out was the prolonged scene of Junior Gorg laying down thinking he's dead, and then the three of them on the green screen dancing in front of him and playing and talking, and then him starting to actually coordinate his dancing with what they're singing, because that had to be done separately. And with the technology back then, I was like, that's really difficult to do. And so it was kind of that little moment of them playing together was pretty impressive, I think.
And also just the sincerity with which Junior Gorg and the performers had to hit that moment of like, I am dead now. It feels very much like being alive.
Yeah.
And they start tickling him. He goes, nope, I will not laugh because I am dead and dead people do not laugh. Like, I was just,
He's convinced.
He's convinced he's dead.
Yeah.
My favorite is also Junior Gorg related, but there was he got to like really be physical, and at one point like kind of threw himself to the ground, sort of. And I was like, with all that gear on and that costume, that's just very impressive that they were like, hey, do you want to take a chance on breaking this thing we really need?
Yeah, and a shortcut coming
so
off
that Junior
too.
Gorg can like dive on the ground or whatever. Like,
that's true.
So I think the physicality that Junior Gorg got to show this week was really impressive to me.
Absolutely.
So, Jordan, what happened on this week's episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation?
All right. So in Star Trek, we have a matter of honor. Is it a matter of honor or a moment of honor? I'm already forgetting the name of it.
God damn you.
Wait, maybe it's not.
Let me
either of
check
those
the
things.
intro to the episode.
A matter of honor. I was right. So prepared. So Starfleet is taking part in a fun exchange program with their officers and officers of non-Starfleet civilizations serving aboard each other's ships to learn more about each other. So the Enterprise is taking one on in the form of the Benzite ensign called Mendon. And according to Wesley, he looks just like the Benzite he took his academy test with in a previous episode, because apparently Wesley's racist openly. But it's totally a different guy, even though it's played by the same exact actor, apparently. And this Mendon, he's really full of himself, but it's kind of in a good-natured way and not malicious. He's just kind of, that's the way his race is. Like, we think we're good at things and we're confident and we want to make things better because of that. But it still annoys the crew. So Picard then calls Riker to do some phaser target practice with him. And he suggests that Starfleet should send one of their officers to serve on a Klingon ship in the exchange program. And Riker likes the idea and he volunteers himself, but he can tell that that's what Picard had in mind the whole time. He was kind of just talking him into it. So Riker gets assigned to the POP, a nearby Klingon ship. But before he goes, he confers with Worf about Klingon culture. And Worf even gives him an emergency transponder just in case things go south on the ship, so they can beam him back if things get hairy on the Klingon ship. He also warns him that Klingon chain of command is very brutal, and if superior officers start looking weak, you can challenge them in battle and kill them to take their place. So now he's forewarned. So Riker beams over to the Klingon ship and introduces the captain, Kargan, but the second in command, Clag, doesn't trust him. So Riker beats him up to earn his place in the ship, and he swears a vow of allegiance to the captain in the ship while he's on board. Before the Klingons fly away, though, back on the Enterprise, Mendon finds a strange bacteria growing on the Klingon ship through the sensors, but he doesn't say anything to anyone yet because it's custom on his ships to not mention anything until you've done a full analysis of your findings. So the Klingons depart, but soon Worf discovers a similar patch of bacteria on the Enterprise, and that's when Mendon speaks up to Picard, and he's like, hey, we have this, I found the same thing on the Klingon ship, which annoys Picard. So he educates Mendon on the proper practices of Starfleet vessels where you report things immediately. You don't do a full analysis first. But back in the POC, Riker is eating Klingon nasty food and making friends with Klingon ladies who all want to have sex with him. But soon the bacteria is discovered by their sensors as well on their ship. But Captain Kargan believes this must be some kind of weapon that was used by the Enterprise to destroy them because the bacteria is quickly eating away at their hull. But Riker insists that the Enterprise wouldn't do that, especially with him on board, but Kargan doesn't believe him. So Kargan orders the ship to cloak and then go after the Enterprise. But meanwhile, back on the Enterprise, they've also realized the bacteria is eating their ship. So Mendon and Data are working on a fix, but they decide to go after the Klingon ship to also warn them, just in case they don't know yet. So the POC sees the Enterprise coming after them, so Kargan assumes they've come to attack them. So he orders all the weapons to the ready to attack the Enterprise, but Riker pulls out his transponder that Worf gave him and activates it, knowing that Kargan would see him do that. So Kargan demands to take the transponder, and when Worf sees the transponder go off on the Enterprise, he thinks it's Riker, and he beams Kargan to the bridge of the Enterprise. Now on the Klingon ship with the captain gone, Riker is now the de facto captain. So he orders them to decloak and contact the Enterprise. So Riker takes his hail, and Picard takes the hail and is surprised to see Riker in command. And he's annoyed that Kargan is on his bridge for some reason. But Riker orders the Enterprise to surrender with a twinkle in his eye, and Picard smiles and he gets the message. He's like, okay, we'll surrender. So they all stand down, and with Mendon and Data finding the solution to the bacteria, they go forward to cleaning both the ships. But they transport Kargan back to the Pach, and he's furious with Riker. But Riker knows he has to find a way to get Kargan back in command without Kargan losing his honor or humiliating him. So when Kargan demands to get his ship back, Riker growls at him, and he allows Kargan to strike him in the face, and he falls to the floor, showing that Kargan is the more powerful on the ship, so he can get back his command honorably. So Riker returns to the Enterprise, learning very much about Klingons and their customs. And that is a matter of honor. So, Steve, what do you think of this episode?
All right. So some things I really liked. They're not say liked, but it was really weird to see the random racism from Wesley at the beginning. Where he mistakes the one alien for another alien he knew, even though I'm pretty sure it's literally played by the same actor, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So that just felt weird, of like the most conscientious kid would do that. It was just strange.
I feel like they tried to cover it up by Mendon saying, oh, I'm from the same pod as that guy, so yes, we look exactly the same or something. He kind of said that, but not really. So it was a little weird.
It was just funny to me.
Yeah.
I thought the whole holodeck shoot 'em up thing was a great example of actors having action and playing around that action, which is like a classic thing that I think about a lot of the high school shows and stuff we did, where they're like, then you just walk across this way, and then they're going to say a line, and then you walk back. And there was always this question of, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like,
why am I doing this?
Am I doing anything right now? Like,
I thought the same thing, is that they could have had that whole conversation in Picard's office, but instead they had it in a shooting range to make it more interesting. Yeah. And I was like, that's cool.
But yeah, so them having to play that action was just so good and satisfying to watch, because someone who had to act with no action for so many things.
Walk over there.
And it's especially a good way to sell dialogue and exposition, which is what they did.
Yeah.
I thought it was an interesting premise for the exchange program, and seemed reasonable and feasible, unlike most of the other things they present for single episodes in this show. So this is both a like and dislike. Ensign Mendon, I hated him. He was so bad. He was just so bad. Even for an unlikable character, I didn't like him. But I love him because he gave Worf like his best episode that we've gotten so far.
I can see that.
Yes, this terrible character was there, but the flip side is we got some great Worf this episode. And then I loved Riker kicking the second lieutenant's or second commander's ass. And it was like a good reminder that, oh yeah, everyone in Starfleet has like hand-to-hand combat shit. Like, oh, I forgot about even we watched Dr. Crusher, like, chop some guys at one point. The bacteria baddie was an interesting angle. Mm-hmm. And the idea of the mistake that happened because of that was clever and well introduced and not forced. We got some great big like world expanding Klingon.
Oh yeah.
Learns about like Klingon laughter, and that dying of old age is like one of their greatest shames. Riker demanding their surrender was such a smart move, because then there's no honor in destroying someone who's surrendered.
Right.
Like even those little things were just smart and clean and very Star Trek-y. And then even Riker getting the captain to redominate him at the end to reclaim his command in front of his men.
It was respectful and awesome. Yeah.
Was good. It was respectful. Dislikes once again, Ensign Mendon. What an awful, even for a bad character, it was a bad character.
I liked him. I thought it was like in the way of hating him, I liked him.
The Klingons, they're like a spacefaring race, which means that they must have high levels of science, deduction, and technology.
Mm-hmm.
But their sudden jump in logic in that there's some sort of bacteria thing eating away at our hull. The Enterprise did a scan. Scans transport bacteria. Like, that felt like, is there a science officer here, guys?
That's what always was brought up, is like, they talk about it's only honorable to die in combat. I'm like, you have to have engineers, scientists back home, people building these ships that don't all go to combat to die. So how's your society work? I'm sure there's books that explain it, but I haven't read what it is. But
well, you and I also mentioned, because of even talk about it here, like there are no old warriors,
right?
In that, like, how would any training or information be retained if everyone was if the oldest, most experienced people were just constantly dying
and killed,
being killed by younger people? So it's hard to believe, and they never really explain it.
Right.
And then, so here's a question. You had a question for me. I had a question for you. Do Klingons have like some sort of infrared vision, or do they have amazing night vision? Because all of their ships are just dark and red.
That I don't know, but it's possible, because you'll find out later on that Klingons supposedly have double anatomy of like everything a human has. So maybe they have 2 optic nerves, maybe they have 2 like internal anatomy. They look the same on the outside, but on the inside, but they also do have 2 penises. That is canonical now.
Hey,
but yeah, so it's like, so yeah, maybe they just have double of everything so they can see better. But yeah, it's just their aesthetic. They're just, they're punk rockers, man.
I just wasn't sure if the Klingon homeworld was like all dark and shit or something. Like if there would be some.
It kind of is. Yeah, that's not a good point, actually. It looks kind of like the inside of that ship. So maybe they're making it feel like home,
Yeah, true.
Good question.
But yeah, so that was my question. Overall, really good episode.
I agree.
Like, this may pretty easily float to the top of this season's pile so far.
It's at the top of the cream of the crop of season 2, I think. One of them that is. And I love what you might not mention, but like, just Riker has such great moments in this episode. It just cements him as just being a brave and badass guy, but also he's human because he makes mistakes and he's surprised by the violence, and he's funny. He's like the Kirk, but more realized into a real human being. Like, he's very Kirk-esque, more real, I think. And that's Jonathan Frakes' acting and the writing. But this really good episode for him, I think. But yeah, and also just the whole thing with Mendon, the chain of command. It teaches about Starfleet and the chain of command and how their whole society works a little bit more too. So yeah, just like a really good episode overall, I think.
Agree.
Perfect. Well, we got some Trek facts for this episode. Brian Thompson, who you might not recognize in the makeup, but he was the Klingon Lieutenant Clag. He's been in lots of stuff. But you've seen him probably in the X-Files. He was what the hell is his name from Mortal Kombat 2? The big bad in Mortal Kombat 2.
Not Shao Kahn.
Shao Kahn, yeah. He played Shao Kahn.
Oh, the Emperor. The Emperor.
Yeah, that's his name, Shao Kahn, though.
Is that Shao Kahn?
Same guy. Oh, no, the Emperor, there's the Asian guy from the first one. He's the first big bad, and then Shao Kahn's like above him. He's like the leader of but yeah, Brian Thompson, which if you try to Google him now, you'll find first news stories of the healthcare CEO who just passed away, who was killed by somebody, but the same name. But this actor has been around a long time. So he was hired for this role, and they let him go without notice before the episode was filmed. And so we tried to call them and find out why they fired him so randomly. And they said, "Oh, you're too large to fit into the costume that Christopher Lloyd had worn in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock," because they were low on costumes. So he quickly volunteered to make any necessary alterations himself to the costume, because apparently he could do some sewing and such. So he came in and did the role, and he altered the costume to fit his giant body because he's a big dude. Did you look him up? Are you seeing pictures of him?
Yeah. I mean, I know who he is. He's been in
so many things.
He's been a regularly working actor. He's got 100 some credits on IMDb.
Oh, yeah.
You've seen him in something.
So if you didn't recognize him in the Klingon, folks, you'll recognize him in everything else. Yeah, so I mentioned that Mendon is played by the same actor, John Putch, as the actor from Coming of Age that we watched earlier. The Klingon dishes that Riker eats throughout the episode were actually made of sushi and forms of offal, which I didn't know what offal was, so I had to look it up.
Oh, yeah, it's guts and shit.
It's a variety of meats, pluck or organ meats, is the internal organs of a butchered animal. The word does not refer to a particular list of edible organs, and these lists of
It's
organs...
just like a general organs definition.
So whatever country you go to has maybe their own version of offal, just any kind of internal organ meat, which is lovely. So I'm sorry he had to eat that anyway. It's the first appearance of the very popular in Star Trek lore Klingon dish gach, which those little wormy things that are in like lots of stuff going forward. It's the first appearance of the phaser range, which we only see a few more times, I think, throughout TNG. Brian Thompson, we talked about earlier, he is in lots of Star Trek, too. He goes on to play another Klingon, Star Trek Generations, the movie. He's a Dosi, which is some kind of alien race in Rules of Acquisition, another episode of Deep Space Nine. He's a Jem'Hadar in Deep Space Nine later on, and To the Death. And he's a Romulan admiral in a reoccurring role of Season 4 of Enterprise later on as well. So you'll see a lot more of Brian Thompson in Star Trek. It's also the first Star Trek guest appearance of actor Christopher Collins. He was the Klingon Captain Kargan. He would guest appear later in the season as a Pack-Led, which I can't wait to see meets the Pack-Leds. Amazing. And several guest appearances on Deep Space Nine. So they love reusing their actors. But that's our little Trek facts there. So what's our Trek connections this week, Steve?
Oh boy, do I got two, and they're both not bad, actually.
All right.
Ensign Mendon, that guy played by a mostly director or producer named John Putch. In fact, this is one of his very few acting things, is doing this on Star Trek. He is the son, he's a director now, son of Gene Stapleton from All in the Family. Those were the days.
Oh, yeah.
She was also the guest star in an episode of The Muppet Show.
Pretty direct, yeah.
Yeah. And then Second Officer Clag, actor Brian Thompson, you talked about, character actor, he played Brock in the movie Dragonheart with Quaid and Connery.
Yeah.
Well, originally, it was going to be done by the Jim Henson Creature Shop, and they were tapped to provide the Dragon effects. And they spent months in a workshop creating a huge animatronic dragon, like head from the shoulder up, and a quarter scale full animatronic body. They shot multiple things of test footage, and then the movie was shelved for multiple years.
Oh, wow.
And when it got dusted off, CG had advanced enough and gotten cheap enough that the studio decided to go full CG, and they didn't use any of the Henson stuff. But there's pictures and videos available, and it kind of looks like Jim Henson's dinosaurs, but at a very high level of detail.
I'll have to see that. Hope they got paid.
Check it out. There's footage online. I'm sure they got paid something, but I'm sure they would have gotten paid more to do a full movie.
That's true.
But the crazy thing is they built this whole thing. It's just nuts.
Wow.
Yeah. So
and Dennis Quaid, who was in that movie, his son Jack Quaid, plays in Lower Decks, the TV show for Star Trek. So it kind of goes back and forth.
And one crossover episode of Strange New Worlds. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go. Nailed it. That makes sense because these are basically the same episode. Both feature people challenging others for power and authority. Riker and the Klingon second officer when he beats the crap out of him, and Red when she challenges Gobo to be leader of the Fraggles.
Very true. Both feature a character pretending to be incapacitated. Junior Gorg kind of pretending to be dead, and Riker pretending to be winded by the Klingon captain just to give him back his honor.
That's good. Both feature rapidly spreading infections, the bacteria eating away at the ships, and Gorgonosis afflicting Junior and killing him.
I like it. Both have characters thinking they can do better than someone else on the computer. Doc versus Sprocket and Mr. Schindlfinney, and the new Benzite Ensign Mendon with everyone on the crew of the Enterprise. He thinks he's better than everyone.
That is great that we had no overlap there somehow.
I like that.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Oh my gosh. But that sounds incredible as well. What's happening?
Transporter malfunction.
All right, it's time of the show where we transport one character from one episode and switch them to the other and vice versa. So what you got for us, Steve?
Trek to Rock this week, I'm going to bring over Captain Klargan and replace the trash heap, who we never actually see this episode. And thank God, because if Red and Gobo had made it there, Captain Klargan would have told her to slay Gobo and to give him a good death and take command.
It would make for an interesting episode.
God they did not make it to the trash heap this week.
Then we would have had smoking and murder in the same children's episode.
They would have had to cut so much.
So much. Trek to Rock, I'd bring Second Officer Clag to replace Junior Gorg, because I feel like they have the same vibe. Dom, 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 dom. And it would be hilarious to see Clag doing the songs and dances.
And then plotting to kill Pa Gorg to take his throne.
Take his throne for the universe.
You have grown weak. All right, Rock to Trek, I'm going to bring over Pa Gorg to replace Captain Kargan, keeping the other Klingons in line through bullying. And the fact that also he is a 15-foot tall giant.
And calling them all dumb. Yeah, it's great.
That's the thing to remember. Gorgs are huge, guys. Don't forget.
Or are they? Because they kind of are the same height as a comparison from them and like Doc.
No, they're not, though.
Really?
They're like double scale. Yeah,
you're right. You're right.
Think of the Fraggles are like down at their ankle/shins.
Yeah.
But for Doc, they're like probably mid-knee.
So Gorg would probably be like 10 feet tall, maybe.
The estimates are 15
to
like 17 feet. Someone did a thing.
Wow.
Some bigger nerd than us.
Yes, they did the math.
Yeah.
Rock to Trek, I bring over Red to replace Ensign Mendon, because she would be challenging everyone's authority just like she was doing with Gobo, and she would have to be humbled by Worf and Captain Picard in the same way. Or
we would just watch Red murder a bunch of people.
Yes. That's how she got her name, Red. She's covered in blood. Well, that brings us to the end of episode 136 of the MuppeTrek Podcast.
Join us next time for Fraggle Rock episode, I Don't Care.
And Next Generation series episode, Measure of a Man.
So from the lovers, the dreamers, and us.
Live long and prosper, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the MuppeTrek Podcast. Be sure to follow us on social media on Facebook and Twitter.
Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform.
This podcast has been brought to you by A Play on Nerds.